Guess I could authorize that. Otherwise, you could be in trouble.
Yeah, it wouldn't put us live if you were like, nope.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think so.
okay. All right. All right. I think we're off and going.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can deal with that situation on your own time. That's pretty funny.
Mhm. There we
Yeah,
go.
that
Okay.
that that's coming to a flashpoint.
Yeah,
That
we're
that
live now. We
I
might want
know,
to not
I
talk
know.
about
No,
it.
I'm just saying that situation's coming.
Yeah.
It's all
Oh
good
yeah, I
anyway.
know.
Anyway, it's okay. God, for some reason that these things come earlier and earlier.
It's
You know.
10:05.
Oh, I know. No, I actually got out of this morning. Got on the battlefield a little bit this morning.
Yep. Morning, Jim. Morning, James.
Oh, hey, dragging me through the snow at 8 o'clock in the morning to look at monuments.
Well, I got my digital SLR
Affect my beauty
out.
sleep. Yeah. I had a night of watching football at the local tavern last night.
That was fun.
That was a good time. It's always fun. It's always fun to go out and see different people and just
Yeah.
kind of commiserate. Even with Raven fans, but it's okay. It's cool. They're good people, and so it
Yeah.
was funny with having one half of the bar. It was almost like that the movie there at the Jets and the
Yeah.
whatever frick it is, West Side Story, and the Steeler fans on one side and the Raven fans on the other side. It was
Yeah.
actually hilarious. They're like segregated, you know.
Mhm. We are not here to talk about sports.
Oh, it's okay. Keep going. Yeah, for God's sake, sports. Anyway, yeah, well, that's cool. No, it's good. It's good to get going with this. I know we get ready to record an episode this week and then another one after that. So we got some good stuff coming. It's nice to, see some snow and get out
Yeah.
here and see some different things.
Yeah, the battlefield is I don't know, like I was thinking about it. Like I find the battlefield much more photogenic in the winter, especially when there's snow.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's pretty. I mean,
Don't
it's
get me wrong, I
definitely
like seeing the green of the spring and stuff, but I mean winter, fall and winter are my two favorite seasons, I think.
yeah. You know, but it's interesting to see what to see how people are out there. It's nice because it hasn't been that cold, but it is nice to see the snow. Snow, it's you don't have to drive in it, so it's kind of cool.
Mhm.
So what's up with you? You're how's your mood today? All right?
Fine.
Okay, just you seem like you're okay. Just wanted to make sure, just make sure.
Jim
Um,
said the entire state of Tennessee has been shut down for the last 2 days. Sun's out this morning. They'll let the melting begin. Yeah, Tennessee, I think got well more snow than what I mean, they don't have the infrastructure. That's why I don't like I try not to rag on them too much here because they don't have the infrastructure
I mean,
to deal with
I
it.
used no, it's different. I mean, I used to live in Texas, and then whenever I get an inch of snow, the whole world shut down. But it's serious. I mean, unfortunately, nature's doing some crazy things. I feel bad for what's going on in Los Angeles. Hopefully, friend
Mhm.
Frank jumps on so we can see how things are going out there. But I mean, yeah, the planet's the planet's angry, Mary. It's
Mhm.
angry. Um, but that's neither here nor there. So, anyway,
Well,
so
speaking, so I mean, I yesterday, like, because you were doing your thing yesterday. So I was like, I had intended on like reading a lot and all that, but instead I decided to go to the Soldiers and Sailors database and see, okay, let's see how many Finchers fought in the Civil War. And so I Googled just the last name Fincher, 199 Confederates and 30 Union. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I found one guy that um it's either FM Fincher or TM Fincher. And
probably F.U. Fincher.
anyway, he fought with the Seventh Texas,
Yeah.
which is was originally Greg's, and then Granbury took over. So I just was like, I felt so drawn to this guy. I went to the library and was using Ancestry, and I didn't find out too much about him, unfortunately. I did find some other Finchers though, that there was, I think, a father and son that fought. I think it was the Sixth Arkansas. So
Mm.
Claiborne's guys. But either way, this guy in the Seventh Texas, if he made it through the war, which I'm suspecting he did, he was at Franklin. And the Seventh Texas, like I just went down a rabbit hole with them, and they're like, I definitely want to they're definitely like the regiment I want to study on the Confederate side.
Mm.
They were absolutely like decimated by the end of the war.
Yeah.
They had 50% casualty rates at one battle. It was just like, but they were, they're at like Pickett's Mill, all
Yeah,
in
they
the
were
Atlanta
all bad
campaign.
boys. All the big boys. Yeah.
A lot of them, like most of them, were captured at Donelson. Because I did find records of, prisoner exchanges regarding that. And that's when Greg and Granbury got sent to Fort Warren. But it was just interesting. Like the genealogy is interesting. And there was there's obviously some on the Union side too. And I found one guy that he was with, there was Finchers that fought with Iowa regiments, and Illinois as well. The one from Illinois was on the March to the Sea. So I thought that was so cool. I don't know how they're related to me, but I did find it interesting that more of them, like, nearly 200 of them fought for the South, because that's where they're primarily concentrated, was there.
They're probably like 5'2" as well. They're probably all small,
God.
angry ankle biters, like some other.
But it was interesting,
No,
you
it's
know.
cool. It's cool, and then that's the thing too, is you go through these rabbit holes, like you just said. It's a good way to describe it, because especially when you start looking at family, and you start
Yeah.
looking through different relatives and in different things, you find out. And like I said before, we've talked about this, and you said, "Oh, I don't know, have anybody related to me in the Civil War?" And I said, "Yeah, I bet you have." And you finally started looking into it,
Yeah.
and I think everybody does. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. We're not talking about
No.
the Jurassic era here. Back in the day. This is a long time, but people have to research their own people,
Yeah.
and everybody. Myself included, I've been able to research some family members, and really I've been focused on one who I've been really
Yeah.
kind of the one. When I do go down that road, I always focus on that one
Yeah.
guy, just because of his history. But we all have it, and that's what's cool about it when you study this war, is you have the ability to make it very personal, right?
Yeah.
And it does help in the fact that you have diaries, and you have letters, and you can look back at some of the letters that the soldiers have left.
Yeah.
Wilder Dwight, for example, you know what I mean? Second Mass, in Tatum. He writes a letter going into battle to his mother, saying, "I'm going into battle," and then he gets mortally wounded, and he writes the second half of the letter, and the handwriting is totally different and covered in blood.
Yeah.
Second Mass. It was, by the way, Mary, it was the same regiment as Robert Gould Shaw at Antietam,
Yeah.
and he was wounded in that same battle. So you can read those, and it can make them very personal, and it can personify them. I mean, that's what's neat about it, And then,
Well, that's why.
if you have a relative who is getting involved on that, then it really brings it home, right?
Yeah. And like I said, I don't know how these guys are related to me. I do want to find that out, but I'm very focused, even though I'm coming up like with dead ends with this one guy in the 7th Texas. Like, I want to find out his story, because I do want to know, like, okay, did this guy like enlist in 1861 and make it all the way through to Bentonville? Because if he did, he was one of like 60 that did.
60 in the whole war? It was more than that.
No. I'm saying in the regiment in the 7th Texas, there was only like 60 some. I think there was only like 60 some of them left.
Mary, you could always tell a Texan, but you can't tell them anything.
Oh, whatever. But I don't know. I felt drawn to him the most. I think because the connection, like, because I really like studying Granbury and Claiborne, and just that connection there. But also too, it's like, well, this is a guy that's probably lost to history. It would be cool to know his story, But there's other ones too. Like I said, there's ones on the Union side that I want to look at as well.
No, at the end of the day, it's whatever you resonate to, and family's a big thing, and that the whole war was about family in a lot of different cases. I mean, you talk about the war brother against brother, and that's not 100% directly geared towards family, but it's still, you have a lot of people fighting on both sides of right around the corner. You got the Culp kids, right?
Yeah.
You got Daniel Skelly. You got all these people who were all friends of everybody, Wesley Culp and the whole Jenny Wade thing, and so it's such a unique perspective when you look at history. It hasn't been probably too many wars, obviously, starting in this country, where you have people who are friends one day and fighting the next day.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's why, like, so Jim just said he had a ton of relatives in the war, 5 of which were at Stones River. I did find a Fincher who was killed at Stones River, as well as one at Kennesaw Mountain. But yeah, like there's, I was thinking, like, looking at, there's, Tennessee had regiments in Union and Confederates. And I do wonder if, because there's Finchers in Tennessee fighting on both sides, if some of them were related, if that's a case of where they, literally were brothers and they're fighting,
especially when
each other.
When you have troops like in Arkansas, cavalry troops were for Union, and when you're having different counties, Free State of Jones comes to mind.
Yeah,
where it's not just state or regional, it's county by county sometimes, and the thing about it is, when you look and you really get into this, and it's easy to put yourself into the mindset, right, of putting yourself into these soldiers. And
Mhm.
we had our friend come down with their child a few months ago. I
Yeah.
remember sitting outside talking with him. He's probably 9 years old, trying to understand specifically because you were probably still sleeping one off, but I was sitting in the back. I was sitting in the back with him, and he's got his Union kepi on, and
Yeah.
he's never been here before. We were talking. He's like, why in the world would someone go and fight? That makes no sense. Why if you're going to get hurt? I remember like I put it on him. I said, you know what? I said, you play soccer. I go, let's just talk about teamwork, right? If you're a player and you're playing hard and you see your teammate is a goalie, he lets in a goal and you lose, it affects you, right? So you don't want to let your teammate down. And that's he started to understand it when I was trying to put him that way. He's like, well,
Yeah.
he goes, because why I could see why I would fight harder because I wouldn't want to let my teammate down. I go, I go, you're starting to get it. That was the whole concept of it. And so when you're talking with kids, that's the easiest way for them to understand. And fortunately, or
Yeah.
hopefully anyway, they'll never have to experience what people in that era did.
Yeah.
But again, draw a parallel so people that age can understand why they're walking, parade formation into canister fire. Because you had to.
Yeah.
You could never go back to your home again
Yeah.
if you were a coward, and that did happen. But that's the way you can help with that message for the younger folks who don't really care one way or the other, as long as they have their phone and they can
Yep.
play their video games, right?
God.
Yeah.
Like the two I found that were in the 6th Arkansas, I think it was, the one was like, the one kid he was only 16, and that's why I'm suspecting it was father and son who enlisted. And the father was like, he was enlisted as like a colonel or something like that, in the 6th Arkansas. So that was like, I was like, wow,
That's about take your kid to work day, huh? Imagine
yeah,
that.
I'm 16 years old. Like,
Well, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, you had 14-year-old kids enlisting.
oh yeah,
You had younger kids, and flag bearers, all that stuff, and drum boys, and that whole thing. But no, but it's a very personal thing when you kind of really get into it, and when you start to really get into the details. Yeah, it's easy to kind of romanticize. I think that's why a lot of people do, especially when about the side that they support. If you're from the South, you tend to romanticize about the South and about your ancestors and all that.
Mhm.
And I think it's because it's such an easy thing to do on both
Yeah,
sides, because you can imagine that putting yourself in that situation, right?
yeah.
I mean, people go. We were sitting in a bar last night. I watched people get worked up about a football game back and
Mhm.
forth. That you can only imagine how, when you look at something much bigger, how that
Yeah.
must have been, especially if you have fathers and sons and brothers and
The
sometimes sisters
neighbors,
sneaking
yeah.
in there.
Well,
Mary,
like,
all Mary Teppy, 114 PA, right?
yep. Well, Caleb said that his relatives were among the minority Confederates in Eastern Tennessee, and a lot of their neighbors fought for the Union.
Well, Eastern
Yeah.
Tennessee, with
Yeah.
it's kind of where Kenny Chesney's from,
Yeah. Kevin mentions that he's got limited data on it, but his family might have been in a few cavalry units, and he had a 3 times great grandfather served in an Ohio unit, when was part of the 100th Day campaign. Oh, James has a question. What effect did voting for senior officers have on that?
as far as what, as far as relative stuff.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you voted for the senior officers, just basically popularity, and then once you were set, it was like dominoes. You rose up as people fell, but yeah, you voted. There's all. I mean, you look at Jay Johnson Pettigrew, right, from North
Yeah.
Carolina. Dude spoke 7 languages, so he started as a private, and they realized how smart he was, and they voted him in as an officer pretty quickly. But like anything, that's no different from today. It's like, if you think of it, if you're in a volunteer group or you're in some sort of whatever group you're in, you're going to vote for people who you're going to vote for.
Yeah.
But I'm sure. I mean, you saw a lot of the family stuff kicking. You look at Joseph Davis. His Uncle Jefferson ran the damn country, and he found himself as a brigade commander
Yeah.
when he never should have. By the way, one of the more incompetence, and he's one of the first arms going in here. So you saw a lot of that. And you could certainly see how different relations affected people you were with. Obviously, you had 3 Chamberlains here.
Yeah.
And that's
the brothers, right? And
yeah. And it's like anything else. But it's cool
I
to
just had
start
to
it out.
change the time on our live because for some reason Facebook put it to 5 o'clock today.
That sounds like a user error situation.
No, Facebook will change, like,
Maybe you should have waited to post that instead of having those 11 Budweisers, then posted it. Maybe
I
maybe
didn't
that
have
was your problem yesterday.
whatever.
It's your
No.
5 p.m.
Yeah, so thanks for letting me know about that, Barbara.
Barbara's
Anyway,
got,
I corrected it and shared it, so
oh, that's
there you go.
good. That's good. Wait, Barbara's got your back. Anyway, but no, it's pretty cool though. But when you understand the whole family thing, I mean, look at the Taylor brothers from First Minnesota, right?
Mm.
You know, Walter and Isaac. And I think most people who study the battle here know them. Particularly people from Minnesota does. Our friend Allie certainly does.
Yep.
Originally from Massachusetts, moved to Minnesota with teachers, and they fought here at Gettysburg, and they were part of the first Minnesota charge against the great Cadmus Wilcox, and one of them died. And if you look, I think it was Isaac was killed actually, and Walter talks in his diary about burying his brother.
Hang on, I have to take something away from the cat. He's got a thumbtack.
Anyway, maybe I'll read some comments, and she's going to run around here. I keep reading these damn things anyway. But I think while she's running around, but I think it is neat to kind of look at some of the family stuff too, and you can look at some of the pictures, and you can see some of the relationships people had too. And oh look, she's back. I don't know how the cat got a thumbtack.
I don't know either, but
I'm sure I'll get blamed. But
no.
But anyway, we were just saying while you were away. Again, you look at some of the pictures, and you can see some of the family pictures, and you can really see it. It's really fascinating to understand. Understand that how the whole thing goes. And like we said a little while ago, we'll probably never understand, or hopefully we'll never understand the plight that these guys went through. But
no.
We were just down Culp Sill this morning. You were dragging me through the snow after we got coffee. We were talking about the 27th Indiana, right?
Yeah.
Talk about the 2nd Massachusetts, and how some of these guys, the histories, 2nd Massachusetts got pounded in Antietam. They got pounded here at Gettysburg. 27th Indiana. These are the dudes who found Lost Order 191. They find themselves here at Gettysburg, and they charge Spangler Spring, and they both get annihilated. And so one of the conversations these guys have as those numbers drop, and how some of those relationships in those regiments and those companies change when you're seeing, like we said before, like when you're seeing some of your closest friends and family killed right in front of you, right? We talked about Rosecrans last week with Garrosh. We talked about some of these other ones. And you talk about, like we said, Wilder Dwight, Antietam, how some of these guys talk about it, and it's not just what's so funny is it's not just the people too. It's like you talk about like the animals, right? There's a story about the Thompson's Battery C, right? Pennsylvania Light Artillery, and these guys are in Antietam, and there's a story how they're in the cornfield, and they're basically trying to retreat back, and the horses are all shot to hell, but they're still walking, and they're all dragging the cannon, and they're all mortally wounded, and it's like they're zombies, and they're walking back. As soon as they got to safety and unlimbered the guns, they all dropped dead. Almost all at the same time.
That's so sad.
It's just obviously they're animals. Who knows? But what do they think? They gave their last full measure of devotion.
Yeah.
If you think
all
about
the
it, right?
horses, the horses. They had dogs in the camps and all that.
Yeah.
Bill says the Brown brothers from Waltham, Massachusetts, 16th Mass.
Yeah.
That's your hometown.
The great Waltham, Massachusetts. Not as famous as the Weeks brothers, Mary, from Waltham, Massachusetts, who emptied many a Miller Lite can in that town. Take a metal detector through those woods, Mary. You'll see what you find, right?
The one thing I thought about with this, you mentioned this whole, like, you're with your friends, your neighbors, whatever, in some of these regiments. That's what I thought about with the 7th Texas when I was reading the history of it, was that there was guys there that would have enlisted in 1861 that were there at the end, and how they felt that, you read in Rufus Dawes' memoirs how he has survivor's guilt. Did those guys have that too? Probably. Like, why am I here and my friend is not anymore?
Rufus Dawes. I dread the thought of the place.
Yeah. And
he's probably talking about going home to Ohio.
Probably. But you think about, you're in the 7th Texas and you get to Franklin, and then Granbury, who's been with you from the beginning, is gone after that. And then you get dragged all the way to Nashville.
Yeah, I know. And I think I also think too that there's a certain I shouldn't say this like this, but I think it's also transactional too, where I hate to say it, but Rufus Dawes specifically talked about it, where after a while seeing people kill down was like watching somebody just trip and fall,
Yeah.
right? Um, so it's one of those things, it's crazy. It
Yeah.
really really is.
Frank's on here.
Oh,
We were wondering how he was doing because he's out in California. And so Frank says, good morning. Happy Fort Fisher 160th Eve and happy 200th birthday to Joseph R. Davis, who led his brigade at Gettysburg, nephew of
we
Jefferson Davis.
Frank, it's first of all, Frank, I'm glad to see you well, everything that's been going on. But second of all, I'm glad you mentioned Joseph C. Davis because we were just talking about him.
Yeah.
Frank, he's one of our listeners. He's from Los Angeles, California, and so
cool
he is, and hopefully you guys are doing well. That's absolutely horrible to even see that stuff. So,
yeah.
geez,
But yeah, like the whole and the nice thing about doing genealogy is like a lot of libraries offer Ancestry for free. The one here in Gettysburg does. So that's where I went yesterday. And the librarian, I was coming up with like, nothing on this one guy, and she came over to check on me. And she's like, "How are you doing with him?" I'm like, I said, apparently he's lost a history. And she's like, "Don't give up. You'll find stuff about him." So I'm gonna keep at it and see what I can find about this guy in the 7th Texas. I mainly want to know, did he make it all the way through the war?
Well, now you got a homework assignment, which is really, really cool,
Yeah. No, it's very very interesting, because, coming from Canada, I was like, oh, I have no direct no direct relatives in the war. And now I'm like, finding them. Frank says he's fine. The fires are far enough away from him, but he can still see the smoke from a distance.
That's scary. Yeah, that's scary, but it's just you hate to see that. But hopefully stay out of the fire, Frank. Hopefully you stay out of there because it's just because some of those videos are absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
Speaking of the wars and speaking of towns burning, we could talk about the episode we'll be doing next week, right?
Yes.
That's called a segue, right? Talk about Sherman again. Unfortunately, from the different type of burning, fortunately, but yeah, so that'll be cool. So we've got Bennett Parton will be on. We actually have the book right here. We're going to talk about this book, which comes out next week. I think it does. Somewhere towards freedom.
Until the 25th, I think.
Yeah, 25th, and it's really good because it's a different spin on the march. We talk about the march, where we talks about Sherman and burning stuff, and all the memes, all the jokes. But when you talk about the thousands and thousands of freed blacks who started following the army, and everyone, it's people know it, but what this book specifically is about that. And about just some of the efforts that they made and how when they got to Savannah, how they had to basically colonize a place called Port Royal, and then Beaufort, and a lot of those communities are still there now.
Yeah,
because of the effort they did. It's really interesting. We'll have him on. He's actually going to be, I think, a couple of days afterwards. He'll be doing a presentation at the National Civil War Museum over in Harrisburg, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure that's going to work out as far as us getting out there, but it's interesting to talk about it. It's a good humanitarian type story. And coming
it's
off
a different spin on it. Like,
we just did the Colby one a couple of weeks ago, which was a very different aspect of slavery.
Yeah.
And so if you read Dr. Colby's book, right, An Unholy Traffic, and then you read this book, it's really a good literal bookends for the experience of the slaves. It's really something. It really, really is. So hopefully people listen to it. I think I'm looking forward to having him on. That'll be a good deal, So
it's a great book. I'm maybe, I don't know, like 60, 70 pages into it, but I'm really enjoying it. The writing is very accessible. It's not like the heavy academic writing. So it's, the average person could pick it up and read it. I know some Civil War books are like, heavy on the academic writing, which is
Colby's book was heavy on the academic.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
It's still a good book. It's still a good book.
Oh no, not a slight on his book. It's just much more. It's much more like academic versus this is more of a storyteller book. This is a lot like Carmichael's book, I thought.
Yes. Yeah.
Where it just kind of talks about stories that happened during. And it's not just Griswoldville, and it's not all that stuff. But they talk a little bit about the battles, but it's really some of the stories of the families following freedom. And then it talks about the Gideonites, which was basically community in Port Royal
Mhm.
mostly Massachusetts abolitionists who were trying to set up a society of freedmen to see
Yeah,
if they could learn basically capitalism and learn to live. They set up schools and they set up churches, and they had a little community going. And then all of a sudden, you've got these thousands and thousands of refugees following
yeah,
Sherman. And the thing about it, when you look about Special Order, Field 15, Sherman's issue, which led to the 40 acres and a mule, which
yeah,
didn't really fall apart. You can read and understand that why he did that, and it wasn't so much humanitarian as it was, let's have a place for these guys to go. So when I
yeah,
go into North Carolina, they don't follow me North Carolina. So it had a
yeah,
military interest in it as well. But it's good. He'll be, he'll be fun to talk with. And anytime you can read, do it. I mean, God, uh, but it's certainly one that I think it's just puts a different spin on things. And if you
yeah,
like to talk about personal stories, you like to talk about that humanitarian thing we always
yeah.
talk about, this is right up your alley, no
Well,
question.
again, it's getting away from the battles as well. Because I think too often we get caught up in studying just the battles and we forget that there's other aspects to the war as well that are, sometimes direct or indirect results of the battles. I just read the chapter, I'm partway through the chapter on talking about the foragers or the bummers, and just how that term bummer might have been more of an insult to the ones that, because there were some that really went rogue, and they broke the rules. But Parton does make the point or of saying that, the author says like Sherman's rules for the bummers were like they contradicted themselves because he was
Well,
like forage liberally, but don't do this, and
well,
it's
I
like,
mean, he told, well, because it was confusing. I mean,
yeah,
he said, do not rob basically middle class or poor farmers,
yeah,
leave them alone. But if you come across a plantation, right? Um, Rip it up,
yeah,
destroy everything. But the lines got blurred. Who's to determine what's a plantation, what's a farm,
yeah,
right? You're hungry and you see a chicken running around. You're not going to sit there and pull out W-2s and ask for their income. Right, and that's the problem. And then the other thing that happened too is as you got further into Georgia, you leave that marshy area,
yeah,
the farms
yeah,
disappear. So you're going to take what you can get.
yeah,
Um, Again, it's Sherman, very much like Grant, but especially Sherman. He put these CWA field orders in,
yeah,
right? Where I don't want you to burn anything because in case I get hauled. Same thing with Ebenezer Creek with Jefferson C.
yeah,
Davis, and that was one of three examples where he ditched people,
yeah,
with the bridges. Um, and of course, he lied and said that they had to burn the bridge because Joseph Wheeler was coming upon them, and the soldiers were like,
it's
bridge
like,
is right
no,
here. We didn't burn it. It's right here, dude. You
yeah,
know, it's in the back of the van. You told us to roll it up.
yeah. Didn't his soldiers hate him?
Yeah, they didn't like him. They didn't like him at all.
I don't like him either.
No, I mean he seemed, but that's the thing is some, and then of course you've got Edward Stanton,
Yeah,
who his phone's ringing off the hook from people in New England, these abolitionist people,
yeah,
guys like Garrison, for example, right? Gould Shaw's family,
yeah.
and now you have to answer to this, and so he goes down there, explains, and Sherman's like, I don't know, Davey, I don't know.
I don't know what's going on.
But he has to deal with this,
Yeah,
unfortunately, and but no, another thing this book talks about, which is really, really interesting, is he talks about how society in Savannah changed after
yeah,
Sherman got there, where it turned into kind of an elitist Southern society with
yeah,
Northern loyalists kind of hiding in the shadows, and then it flipped the other way, um, and how you had masters begging their former slaves for food,
yeah,
things like that. So it's definitely a dogs and cats living together mass hysteria situation when you get to Savannah. He does a good story telling the story. So I mean, read everything you can, but this is a good one to read. That most people, I mean, if these guys didn't reach out to us, I never would have read this book. I
no,
probably
I
wouldn't
think we
have.
would have, I think we would have found out about it. And I mean,
Yeah, but
I like it because it's just a different perspective on the march. And the other thing that he talks about too, that I had never thought about before, was that when the foragers and bummers went out and took food, there was sometimes still like slaves on the plantations, and they would take everything, and those slaves would be left with no food. That's the thing, is like, so then they had no choice but to leave
yeah,
because all their food was gone. So there was like this issue of having enough supplies. And by that point, especially as you said, as they got into the marshier areas where there was not as many like crops or whatever, the blockade had had an effect too, because again, they're not getting the supplies they need, including certain types of food. So that is really starting to become a problem at that time as well. But that's when you see like how things are, how this, what Grant and Sheridan and Sherman are all doing is starting to basically strangle the Confederacy.
Oh yeah, of course, and that was always the plan.
Yeah.
And then when you start to see get to Savannah, and that's why things like Fort Fisher are important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And closing the ports and taking care of those, because really at that point it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
It really, really is. But you still have to deal with the internal.
Yeah.
And it's and then one thing this book talks a little bit about, he talks a little about your boy Howard, Mary.
Yeah.
This last couple of chapters are about the Freedmen's Bureau, and it talks specifically about his impact and a lot of things he did. And we mentioned that Port Royal over there, and how much he helped set up the schools, and how that helps lay the foundation for the colleges he would later set up.
Yeah.
So a lot of his impact, the only reason why he was put in charge of Freedmen's Bureau is because of how much he did with this march, and how much when they got to Savannah, how much they did all these things, because it's really fascinating to see he like basically had the greatest on the job training ever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't they just threw him in there because he was an abolitionist and he couldn't juggle, Mary. They put him in this job because he had experience in dealing with these free people, and he actually truly cared.
Yeah.
So now when they set up this whole thing with the Freedmen's Bureau and all the things he did, until of course Andrew Johnson started taking
he was not, I mean, Howard was not able to, do what he really wanted to do with the Freedmen's Bureau. Oh, good morning, AQ. She's listening from a chilly Rockport, and Matthew is on here from Charleston too. And good morning, Ed.
Oh yeah, I love Charleston. Charleston's a great city. King and Queen Street, Mary. Holy grail.
Yeah. Need to go there sometime.
Rockport's nice too. I like Rockport's nice.
We never got there. We'll have to go there.
I know. But they sell those candy lobsters, those red ones. I remember those when I was a kid. We used to go up there all the time and go to Rockport and get these lollipops.
Oh, really?
AQ probably knows what I'm talking about, but but yeah, it doesn't matter. The mind works the way it works, I suppose, sometimes.
But yeah, the whole thing with with the Freedmen's Bureau, and I don't know as much about this as I should. We talked a little bit about it in the episode we did about Howard, but just how Fernando Wood had this vendetta against Howard personally.
He was such a small fish in the grand scheme. He could bitch and complain all he wanted to, but
he was the one that brought it forward to the government that it was corrupt, and he did it twice.
Yeah, I know.
And Howard was like, yes, there was corruption going on. It was people that turns out I shouldn't have trusted them like I did. And that's one of the reasons that he ends up, Sherman is like, okay, we're going to send you out west until all this, kind of goes away. But yeah, he's, the foundations for the Freedmen's Bureau are laid for him on the March to the Sea. And he writes a lot about after he got to Savannah, the letters he writes to his wife, he talks about the refugees and the work they do.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about how they would have them, there would be couples. So, the husband, the freedman would be an engineer and help out with roads and digging and all that. Whereas the wife would cook for the officers. So there was that kind of, so Howard made sure that they had jobs to do so that they were able to stay on the march. And that they didn't.
Yeah, that was a big challenge too, because Sherman was like, if you can work, you can stay.
Yeah.
So a lot of them were a lot of pioneers. They chopped the roads, but they also knew the secret roads in and out, how to avoid the cavalry too.
Yep.
You got 13,000 cavalry under the War Child, Joseph Wheeler, who's following them around, just being a pain in the butt to them. But you're able to sneak, especially on recon missions to find food and stuff. They knew where all the secret paths were, all the stonecutter roads, to find their way to back and forth. And sometimes they got caught, sometimes they didn't. But if you couldn't pull the rope, you didn't come. That was the deal. And a lot of the old people, a lot of the women and children, they basically were told you can stay behind, or you can find something to do. You have to work. And it was a work camp. And for a lot of the men, and Sherman would not let them be soldiers. which was one of the irony things too, because
Yeah.
they probably, I mean, they didn't need fighting men on this for the most part once they got past Griswoldville, but you still need, he wouldn't let them fight. So he made sure that they did the road work, they cooked, they put the tents up. And one thing that was interesting too is they wouldn't let the freed people stay in camp with them. They had to stay
No.
outside of the periphery, which was kind of like with the cavalry, who was looking to catch them and bring them back or kill them. It was kind of like swimming out at night with a shark star out beyond the rope. So you had to watch yourself. But sometimes the soldiers would say, if you can come in, if you can sing and dance like the movie Glory, and entertain us, you can stay in our camp. So it was almost like hazing.
Yeah.
So you sit there and you dance and sing for your life. And it's a sad reality. It just is. But
it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot on the march. Is that side of it, the freed people that are on there. Okay, AQ says we can come up and stay with her, go get lobster and go to the crow's nest in Gloucester.
Oh, the crow's nest in Gloucester. Yeah, here we go with that, But no, that's cool up there. It's nice. Definitely miss it sometimes up there, but not as much as much really. No. But it's interesting because you talk a lot about battles and generals and things like that. But it's when you get a book that comes out that it's really passionate about the subject, and it's clear that Bennett Parton, this was probably his PhD dissertation, I would imagine, because it's very well written. He's a young kid too. I don't think he's even 40.
No, I think he's in his late 20s or early 30s. But it's a very well written book, great book. Comes out, it might be on the 21st. Caleb mentions Trudeau's Southern Storm tells a lot about that aspect of the march too.
Oh, Southern Storm.
It's a great book. Trudeau's a great author. Not many authors Trudeau has written about Gettysburg and he's written about the march. So Eastern and Western theater. And he's a great author.
I'm just teasing you. Teasing you. You know how it is.
I enjoy Southern Storm.
That was back in your Sherman days.
God, I still enjoy Sherman, like studying him. He's interesting,
Who's Sherman?
Yeah,
of course he is.
He's a great study.
He's a fascinating guy when you study him from a psychological standpoint. We look at him from militarily and the whole deal, and the more you peel away levels of the onion, you realize that he's not a good commander as far as fighting goes, but he's really good at setting up battle. He's a great general manager. He's not a good coach.
He's good at managing his subordinates and recognizing the talents that they had. Like you look at Slocum and Howard when they go out west, they're able to get away from all the politics that are in the Army of the Potomac and all that. And they're different out there. I mean, Slocum's kind of a diva when they first get out there because he refuses to serve with Hooker and they have to send him up close to Vicksburg. But then when Hooker has his temper tantrum and leaves, that's when Slocum comes back down to be with them. And that's why he ultimately ends up on the march. Richard says, Bloody Road South and Last Citadel are better reads than Gettysburg or Southern Storm for Trudeau. I still enjoy Gettysburg and Southern Storm.
Yeah, Last Citadel's a good book. Yeah, that's definitely a good one. I mean, I think, and it's interesting because a lot of them, sometimes you can read these books and it's the same subject and it's like you're reading at two different subjects. They have different spins on it.
Yeah.
Like you could read Southern Storm, right? Mm-hmm. Or you could read the one, what was the one we did a couple of years ago?
The March in American Memory.
Right, that one.
And Catherine.
And right, that one. And then you could read this one, Somewhere Towards Freedom. It's all about the march, but it's a totally different aspect of different spin on it. So give kudos to this kid because this author, I say, because he did a good job with finding something different. I mean, there's only so many Lincoln and Grant and Lee books that can come out, Mary.
Yeah. I am enjoying the Gelzo's book about Lee.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Gelzo is he writes stuff and you swear he was there because he puts the way he slides his personal opinions in with the facts. I know some people have issues with Gelzo from Meade and some other things, but I'll tell you right now, I don't think I've talked to a smarter Civil War person than Allen Gelzo.
Oh.
I mean, the dude. I mean, he knows his stuff. You may not like what he says sometimes, but I'm sorry to tell you.
Oh, he's brutally honest about stuff. That's the thing.
He backs up his stuff, and I thought it was hilarious when we had him on that time. He had a big picture of Meade in his background. And you know he does that on purpose.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's so freaking funny. Um, but
Oh
no,
yeah, and Jim says like Gettysburg is an overcovered topic, and I
of
do
course
believe
it is.
it is.
All
It
those books
absolutely is.
behind me are all Gettysburg. There's
Yeah,
only,
and
I mean, there's only so much you can read about it, and the thing about it though is you can learn more about Gettysburg by reading books not about Gettysburg.
yeah,
You read the Maryland campaign, and you read about the four battles down there, right? Um, South Mountain, Harper's Ferry, and Antietam, and Shepherdstown. You learn more about Gettysburg because you can get to Lee's head about what's coming
yeah,
next. But if you don't understand the Maryland campaign in '62, Gettysburg, it's not it's much more difficult to understand if you don't understand that, right?
yeah.
And that's where all the misconceptions come in,
Mhm.
specifically um, with Lee and Hooker and people like that. And you look at a lot of the changes, right? You
Yeah,
have, and we said before, not one corps commander at Gettysburg was in that position at Antietam
yeah,
less than a year before. And admittedly, it wasn't all the same corps either. It's
yeah,
first, second, fifth, sixth, ninth, and now 12th were at Antietam. And so you have some different people, but you saw some people rising up into those battles to put
mhm,
themselves in positions here.
yeah,
I mean, Howard, when that battle started, he was a brigade commander. Hancock was a brigade commander.
yeah,
Um, he rode to he rose he went in the division. Hancock did after Israel Richardson was killed.
yeah,
Howard moved himself up, and you saw Hooker move up big time. And obviously Burnside.
yeah.
Burnside goes from like division to commander in like 10 days.
That's
Because
yeah,
he's a division commander on the 9th under Jesse Reno. Reno gets killed at Fox's Gap, and then a week later, he finds himself in command, or actually not a week later, right afterwards, after Antietam, when McClellan, it was October, so it wasn't immediately after, it was a couple of weeks. But you want to talk about rising quick. That's
yeah,
like Custer going from captain to colonel in 3
yeah,
days. That's how fast these guys moved up.
yeah. It's crazy how much, you look at Antietam and then a year later, Howard and Slocum are out west because, they got to go out to Chattanooga, and things have changed so much. Kevin mentioned South Mountain's a fascinating battle that gets very little attention. I agree. I find it a little bit like, I mean, I'm always like, I mean, I love Antietam, but South Mountain is such a
So,
interesting battle.
South Mountain is to Antietam the way Second Winchester is to Gettysburg.
Yeah.
I mean, you have put it this way: if you study Gettysburg, you better study Second Winchester. You better,
Yeah.
okay? Especially if you want to take a guide exam down here, right?
Yeah.
Also, if you want to study Antietam and you don't study South Mountain, you can't. It's impossible because
Mhm.
you want to talk about how things change so quickly and
Yeah.
how important those battles were, right? I mean, people like to rip on McClellan. I mean, they did really well. I mean, South Mountain was an ass kicking.
Yeah.
General Garland, Confederate, gets killed. I mean, yeah, you do lose Jesse Reno on the Union side.
Yeah, the Iron Brigade gets its name.
The Iron Brigade, exactly. But
Now, who do you think said it? Was it
it was
Hooker or
Gibbon.
was it McClellan?
Who said it?
Yeah, who said those men fought like iron?
I don't know. I
Gibbon
mean,
was commanding them.
he was commanding them, but probably McClellan, realistically speaking.
Yeah.
But they were the Black Hats up at that point,
Yeah.
after Gettysburg.
Well,
But I
because
mean,
Gibbon made them wear that uniform and
yeah,
they all hated it at first. And they didn't like him at first because he was such a strict disciplinarian.
yeah.
But then he introduced like a reward system. If you were good, you could leave camp and go into town.
If you want, yeah, yeah. If you want to read a good book on South Mountain, there's a book by John Hoptack. He's a ranger here at Gettysburg. His book's probably the best one. But you want to, this is what I was saying, making parallels, right? Think about it. Robert Lee finds himself in enemy territory with his army spread out for miles, and he suddenly finds a Union right on his tail. Has to
Yeah.
call his army back and fight just in time. Sound familiar?
Yep.
That's Antietam.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So you have Stonewall Jackson and his guys at Harper's Ferry. You've got McLaws. They're all over the place. Now you find out that the Union is at South Mountain and they're attacking. He's got to blow the conch shell, bring them all together. He finds a road network and all focused on Sharpsburg. they just repeat themselves. These battles is over and over and over again, and so he brings them all together, sets them up, and admittedly, the difference is Lee attacks at Gettysburg versus McClellan sits and waits to be attacked and for a whole day,
Yeah.
and then he finally attacks. The Battle of Antietam actually started on the 16th, the night before.
Yeah.
And no one talks about the skirmish line, but the parallels between those two battles they're night and day. I mean,
Yeah.
they're hand in hand.
Yeah.
But the setup is exactly the same. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
So if you,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so if you want to get a real good understanding of Gettysburg, study the Maryland campaign, study what leads up to Antietam. The Battle of Antietam is different than the Battle of Gettysburg, obviously, but the lead up to it and how they found themselves fighting is exactly the same, almost exactly the same.
Yeah,
which are just different people, you know.
Frank mentions that both armies had more smaller sized regiments at Antietam than Gettysburg. And then he said he took a licensed battlefield guide tour at Antietam, another at South Mountain, and he enjoyed the South Mountain tour.
South Mountain's cool, but the only problem with South Mountain is Crittenden's Gap is nothing to see. Turner's Gap, there's not much to see. There's a house that was there. Fox's Gap is cool because you can see the markers. There's a North Carolina monument. You see the marker where Garland was killed on the Confederate side, and the marker where Reno was killed. Literally, they're 50 feet apart from each other. Mm-hmm. So if you find yourself on that hill in a fire, get the hell out of there because that's obviously a bad place to be. But there's not a lot of parking. There's not a lot of places to visit and see. If you're going to go to South Mountain, definitely Fox's is the gap to go. Yeah. There's more to see there.
Yeah,
and then go to the Washington Tower.
Yes, the Washington Tower is cool. Yeah. Kevin mentions too a great battlefield walk. And how many future presidents were there? Wasn't there like 3?
Yeah.
At Antietam.
Now there's a lot. Despite what the children of Gettysburg say, Mary, there was 5, not 3. Actually,
McKinley, Garfield. Who were McKinley, Garfield? Who else?
President. I have to think about this one for a bit. There's obviously McKinley, Grant. Garfield, Grant's. No, what the fuck? I'm blanking on it on the top of my head.
Someone will
be on the spot, you know. But yeah, I remember looking at it. At the time we did it was pretty quick to pick up on because they had the 3. But McKinley's a fascinating story too because he was a guy who fought at Sharpsburg, and he was kind of a secondary guy.
He brought them coffee.
And that literally.
Oh, right Hayes. Jim just said Hayes.
Right, Hayes. He's one I was forgetting about. Rutherford B. Hayes. And you look at it down where the Rohrbach Bridge is, which is now known as Burnside Bridge.
Yeah.
He's got a good monument down there. A huge monument for bringing coffee. Mm-hmm. Back when I was a kid, back in Dunkin' Donuts, they had a guy who made the donuts. That's like a monument to him. He did more than that, obviously, but that's the joke about it,
AQ mentions the Catoctin Mountain Pass is a good drive too.
Yeah, you gotta be careful driving through there with the deers and the animals running through there, though.
Yeah,
I forget whoever said in the chat here, but studying the South Mountain battles is a really cool battle. Because especially if you've gone up there, even now the terrain's vicious. Trying to march their way up there.
Oh yeah.
And it's just the Confederates held on the best they could, but the Union hit them with everything, and they burst through. And you find you're Robert E. Lee. You find yourself, wait a second, what do you mean the whole army's right here? And he's like, one of the adjutants is like, I'm on a hill. I can see miles and miles of blue uniforms. Yeah. He's like, but they're not supposed to be there.
They're not supposed to be.
And even Stonewall Jackson goes to Lee, I thought you told me McClellan was not aggressive. I thought you knew him. Lee's like, well, this is very unlike him. And so he's like, we better get, you better get your ass up here from Harper's Ferry. You better get Harper's Ferry under control, and he does, and Dixon Miles and gets killed, all that stuff. And he's able to get back and set up. But the problem with McClellan was if McClellan had attacked on the 15th or the 16th, he would have run right through Lee, but he waited. Yeah. And he waited because and then when he did attack, he didn't send in the 5th and the 6th.
Yeah, he kept them in reserve.
He didn't send in Franklin. He didn't send in Fitzjohn.
Wasn't Burnside like, send me more guys, and McClellan's I ain't?
Well, the problem was, the plan was hit the flanks.
Yeah.
Cornfield, West Woods, Hooker comes down, the 12th Corps comes down, and then we're going to hit with the 9th Corps on the south, the 3 bridges, and then we're going to wait for the middle to break, and we're going to break the middle. The middle broke And that's what the sunken road is. But he doesn't attack, he doesn't push, and that's what gets him. And that we've waxed poetic on certain things about McClellan here off and on, but that's one there's no excuse for.
No.
He had the breakthrough. He did.
They're human. They all make mistakes. They're not perfect. But that's a big one.
He's sitting up there at the Pry House with Fitzgerald Porter, and they're looking through the telescope. I don't know if they're looking for girls in the window. What the hell they're doing? But they're looking across the field and they go, "Hey, there's a big breakthrough here. We could probably get through that." Yeah, you're probably right. Well, let's just wait and see what happens. And nothing happens, right? And then AP Hill shows up, fortifies the south part of it, and that's it. And then Lee takes off. But he had him. He had him in his hands.
Yeah.
But again, just like you can make people rip on Meade for letting Lee escape, which is not really true.
Yeah.
That's kind of what McClellan did. But again, but McClellan could not risk a counterattack and losing because he knew Lincoln had the Emancipation Proclamation. He knew he had the win. It's like you're at the craps table in Vegas. And you know you could probably make more money, but you've already won and you just walk away. That's what he did. Because if he went in and got beat, he wasn't going to be able to issue that. And you had all the the stuff in Europe going on with the recognition stuff. See, he had to win, and when he realized he had the win, he just instead of trying to keep running the score up, he just took a knee, let the clock run out.
Yeah,
and people hit him on it, and he not unfairly, but that's a big part of it,
Yeah, and Caleb says that any other commander might have been able to beat Lee at Antietam. Maybe.
Yeah, but I think we and again, this is where I'm gonna defend McClellan though. Okay, again, is he's still up to that point does not know how many men Lee has because he's not just pulling Miss Cleo into the conversation to find out, right?
I sent you that picture for the other day.
He's getting reports from guys like Pinkerton, from Curtin in Pennsylvania, of these high numbers and really inflating their numbers. A bunch of F-150 drivers, Mary, all of them, right? And so they're trying to make it sound like there's 200,000 Rebs across there, right? And so if you're McClellan, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
He piecemeal. But the problem is when you're speaking to Antietam, when Hooker attacks and you finally do drive back the Confederates, and you finally push back Hood after he makes his counterattack, and Hood loses 60% of his division, gets slaughtered. And then you have that breakthrough at the Sunken Road with Israel Richardson and with all those DHO, all those guys. There was an opportunity there, right? There was. You even have Longstreet himself, pulling the cannon lanyard. Yeah. But actually, he was holding horses, as everybody else was. But people like to say he was pulling the thing, but he was holding horses. But for the most part, that you had the opportunity to burst through. You did because you also had this Edward Sumner's Second Corps.
Yeah.
Right. But the problem is Hooker gets shot in the foot. He's riding on a white horse, the brightest horse. He's like cruising down Main Street with one of those cars with all the lights go on. Look at me, right? He's riding around in the front. Hooker always rode in the front on a big white horse. And of course, he gets shot in the foot. And he realizes, after a while, his boots filled up and he's losing consciousness. And he falls apart and there's no more guiding person. Because again, McClellan's not on the field.
No.
Mansfield, 12th Corps, he's chasing the 10th Maine into the woods and he gets killed. He thinks he's shooting at their own men. And they go, no, there's Rebs in there. No, those are our own men. Guess what happens? He gets shot in the chest by his own men, and he's dead. And then that's the whole thing too.
Yeah,
but it's all a mess. The whole thing's always a mess.
Well, Kevin mentions like the fog of war gets lost sometimes, and Antietam seems to be a good example of that.
There's no question it is. But you feel bad for Mansfield. You know how long he was in command for? 2 days. Yeah. He was chained to a desk in Washington, and he wanted to be in field command. He finally got the job. And he got killed 2 days later because he bad luck, bad circumstances.
Yeah.
He's part of that second wave of the 12th Corps coming in. But again, instead of attacking all at once, right? Like they wanted to, it's piecemeal. It's the 1st, it's the 12th, it's the 2nd, it's the 9th, with the 5th and 6th staying way back. And so that's Antietam. It's just everyone stuck talking about Antietam, but I mean that's just the parallels to Gettysburg, especially the lead up. Are absolutely unmistakable. If you want to, if you study both battles really closely, you'll really notice it because it's the same. And we saw Gaines Mill, same game plan by Lee.
Yeah.
Overland campaign, exact same game plan. So there's only so many times you play the same record over and over again. You tend to notice, you tend to memorize the words.
Yeah. Well, that's like, I mean, my battle is definitely like Chickamauga, Chattanooga. And there are parallels with Gettysburg. You have Gettysburg participants from both sides
Yeah.
at Chickamauga as well as at Chattanooga. Like Longstreet is a big reason why they had the breakthrough, which, by the way, the 7th Texas was part of that, the breakthrough through the Union line. You have, for Chattanooga, you've got Slocum and Howard there as well. And then you have Knoxville, which is when Longstreet's making his way back, and you have Sherman and Howard going after him. But it's like there's similar things that happen, like with Rosecrans realizing his army is spread way too thin. He's got to bring them all back together. Bragg is a lot closer than what he thought. And it was Thomas that brought that to his attention. If you want to see like an interesting, like a really an understudied relationship is that between Thomas and Rosecrans. The two of them were they were, first of all, they're good friends, but secondly, they worked very well together. Thomas is definitely the adult in the room in a lot of ways. He definitely is in the Atlanta campaign because he's the one that, like, after Kennesaw, it's either after Kennesaw or Pickett's Mill, that, Sherman's like, oh, well, we didn't lose too many guys. And Thomas is like, if we keep having battles like this, we're not going to have an army when we get to Atlanta. Maybe we need to slow our roll a little bit.
Yeah, no, there's no question. And that's the whole thing is you're going to have your aggressive guys, and you're also going to have your passive guys, and everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses. And then that's always the whole thing with that. But that's, I mean, again, Thomas is, people don't study a lot of Thomas because he's kind of a milquetoast guy. He's an important guy, but he's somebody he's not sexy. He's not flashy like a Sherman or a Braxton Bragg type. That's not who it is,
Yeah, Howard said that Thomas was just, in Howard's eyes, Thomas was up there with Grant for commanding. That he was very, very good. And like he definitely saw Thomas as being better than Sherman for when it came to command.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. It's everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses, right? I mean, even Longstreet and Longstreet and Jackson, they butted heads.
Yeah. Well, my favorite Thomas quote and story is the cemetery in Chattanooga, where someone was like, "Oh, we got to bury all these soldiers by state," and Thomas is like, "I'm tired of states' rights. Mix them up." And that's why the National Cemetery in Chattanooga, it's not like Gettysburg.
Yeah.
The states are all mixed up because Thomas was like, we're not doing this.
No question.
Frank mentions a book by Brad Gottfried, Lee Invades the North, a comparison of the Antietam and Gettysburg campaigns.
Godfrey, that I know the book he's talking about. Godfrey has a bunch of really good maps book. Like he has the maps of Gettysburg, the maps of Antietam, the maps of First Bull Run. He's mostly a map guy.
Does he have the ones like did he do the ones for like Tullahoma and Chattanooga and Chickamauga too?
He has Brad Gottfried probably has the gold standard book for Phil Kearny. So if you like Phil Kearny, it's the history of the first New Jersey. And if you read his book, I mean, that it's probably the best book on Kearny. I know the book Frank's talking about, but when I think of Godfrey, he's the maps guy. He writes all the books about the maps. But there are absolutely definitely there are definitely comparisons to the two. So when you take a peek at that, you can get a real good idea from how they are.
Bill's got a question. How well did Meade and Slocum work together, in particular at Gettysburg?
I mean, I don't think they're great or bad. I mean,
Slocum is a fly under the radar.
Yeah, I mean,
fascinating guy, but very much.
Slocum had a lot of cachet. He ranked for the most part all these guys.
The highest ranking officer at Gettysburg.
But I think Slocum let him do his job, and Meade had his own things to worry about. But there was no animosity. I mean, the only real, you had animosity you had a little bit obviously with Dan Sickles with Meade. But I think once the battle started, Meade was focused on here. And anyway, he was focused on, do I fight offensively? Do I fight defensively? Where the hell are my corps? Dude, where's my car? Right. That's kind of that's kind of how it was. Slocum he did his job. He did exactly what he was. They weren't the most engaged corps. So I think if they were more if he was in charge of, say, the second corps or the first corps, or the fifth, it might have been interesting to see how, if there would have been any friction between the two. Slocum,
Yeah.
I want to do this, I want to do that, but since he was the where he was in the 12th, I it's tough to say.
Yeah. Well, I think he, and he kind of becomes a bit of a running joke, no pun intended, with that he's slower. And even Howard makes reference to it at Bentonville, where Howard actually says he's like, and Slocum got there before me.
No, I mean, right. And when I say not the most engaged, what I mean is right up front the way they were. I mean, of course, they were Culp's Hill, but by the time most of the fighting took place, you're talking about 1,300 New Yorkers. You're talking about George Sears Green. And then when you come back for the morning of July 3rd, they weren't right up there with on the Emmetsburg Road or anything like that else.
Yeah.
I'd be curious if when he got the orders to pull out and go to the Union left on July 2nd, how, if there was any flack back and forth. Because you think about it, Slocum knew the terrain and he knew the importance of Culp's Hill. If the idea of leaving one brigade on Culp's Hill, you start the morning with 10,000 men, by lunchtime you got 1,300 people.
Yeah.
And by 5 o'clock, 6 p.m., you're engaged. Now you're fighting at Culp's Hill, and by the way, it's nighttime. You're fighting one of the rare examples of nighttime fighting.
Yeah.
You've got one brigade. So you wonder if maybe there was what the hell was that all about after the fact?
Yeah.
But I never read any friction about
it. My understanding of Slocum is he's pretty, I don't know, just kind of roll with it type of guy. Again, like when he comes onto the field at Gettysburg after Hancock has left, he is temporarily in charge of the field, I think, until Meade gets there as the commander. The only time Slocum was really kind of a diva was when they went out west. And as I said earlier, he refuses to stay anywhere near Hooker. He couldn't stand Hooker. And I wonder if that maybe comes from Chancellorsville, how Hooker laid blame on everybody but himself after that battle, but Slocum could not stand Hooker at all.
Nobody, I mean, no one really liked him. I mean, the soldiers liked Hooker, but the commanders did. I mean, you think about how pissed Meade was, speaking of Chancellorsville, when he wanted to attack, and he had Jackson, he had those guys over a barrel, and he was told, nope, don't attack. And a lot of it was because he'd been hit in the head at that point. Speaking to Hooker, how much that clouded his head, right?
Yeah.
But again, I mean, I was, if I can go back into the time machine and go back to one day to one of these battles just to watch how British running around, how much you can't see, and sit there and say, well, what you probably should have done is should have done that. But I mean, certainly it's in real time. It's more difficult than, than 160 plus years later. But it's fun to study it. You look back. Yeah. I mean, you got these people. We were at the AP Hill thing last week and talking about some of the decisions that they had to make, the Confederates on July 3rd, and they literally had 5 hours to make a huge decision about what they were going to do, and we've been picking that decision clean for 160 years.
Yeah.
Why didn't Carn and Posey attack, for example, right? Little things like that. Why was on the second, why was Ambrose Wright not supported? Things like that. And so it's easy to have fun with that, but in real time, Ambrose Wright was pretty upset.
Yeah.
But they had no time to make these decisions.
No,
that's why it's fun of it. It's all we do is Monday morning quarterback. That's this whole field. That's all we do. But
I would have done this. It's like, no,
it's fun though. And especially when you go on some of the serious Facebook sites, right?
I've left so many of those.
Oh, me too. I'm only on a couple here and there, but if you and you read the stuff, well, what they should have done. And there's certain polarizing figures. Obviously, McClellan's one, Longstreet's another one. You could just pick one. There was always someone, Rosecrans. Oh. And suddenly everyone's a Jomini expert. Yeah. They spent the day reading Clausewitz while they were,
having their coffee.
Yeah. But that's the whole thing too, that's as you study this, I find personally, and this is speaking North and South, as you read this stuff and you really spend a lot more time than you probably should, most normal humans would, you realize how good they actually did, all considering the info they had. Speaking of South Mountain, how the hell they found their way through there is a miracle. How Lee can lead an army this far. How Stonewall can move his men 20 miles. How AP Hill can move his miles from Harper's Ferry all the way to Sharpsburg in 5 hours, right? How Meade and Hooker can get their army from Virginia up here to Maryland that quickly. It's fascinating, and how they can, where to place the guns or where to place the people. How guys like Charles Payne or guys like Hotchkiss, or how these guys can make the maps as accurate as they have. It's fascinating. It's a different thing, but you have to admire it because it's of just how they were. But it's easy to criticize. We sit there with these lectures, and there's all these people sitting there. Well, I hear them muttering here and there about the little things, but it's fun. And of course, I'm going to be subjected to sitting through Ohio at Gettysburg here in a couple hours.
But it's Wayne Motts.
I know. I'll just sit there and deal with that. That's fine. That's obviously it's important to deal with. We're gonna go see. We got to represent our friend Wayne, so we got to go.
Richards is the only person with a less comprehensive understanding of the status of forces at any point in the battle than the commanders is Ron Maxwell.
Well, yeah, that's true. Ron Maxwell. You know what though? Hey, you know what? He made his movie, and he's made a lot of money on it, and he's still talked about today. And so Ron Maxwell on his Facebook page, you can write hello as a Facebook status. He'll get 5,000 likes. So he did something well. So good for him. Good for him.
And James is like, is there really a universally beloved figure in history? There's not. I mean,
of course.
The thing with the Civil War is you get people very, very passionate about it. And
I mean, there's probably three: George Washington, Tom Brady, and MLK. That's probably the big three, But I mean, the reality is you can pick and choose. And you can there are people who hate George Washington. There are people who hate, and that's people are people. But universally beloved, I don't know, Jimmy Carter, maybe. For his most recent history, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's 50-50, 20/20 hindsight. But in the war, though, I mean, you could have even the hardest core Confederate people, and they fight over Lee and Longstreet all the time. Still, they fight over, Stonewall Jackson. They have everything. They don't want to hear anything bad about him. Jeb Stuart. There are definitely sacred cows in history.
Oh yes, definitely.
Grant's a sacred cow. If you go with him, you get of course, the greatest sacred cow is definitely Lincoln.
Yes.
I mean, look, I love me some Lincoln. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, there are some people who think literally he walks on water, and if you veer off that 1 second, they just jump all over you, and that's fine. That's what they believe in. Nothing wrong with it. But I don't know if that's a good question actually.
Yeah, but there are definitely, like you can be talking about Rosecrans and not mention Grant, and somebody who worships Grant comes in and it's like, how dare you say this? Blah blah blah. Grant was the best. And it's like, okay, I love U.S. Grant. He's awesome, but he's a human and he's kind of a mean girl at times, especially when it comes to Rosecrans. Like there was just something between the two of them that Grant, I don't think liked him very much. But and when you have something like the movie Gettysburg, it elevates some of these people on another pedestal, and like, I know like Chamberlain gets a lot of love, but what he did here is important. But same with David Ireland. But you can study the two equally and not put one down.
But they're God's sakes, those are the ones who get all the press. But I mean, you can run down, you can go through Colville, Louis Francine. I mean, you can go right down the list, and you can make a case. Paul Revere, Devereux. You can go through right down the list, and every one of those people is important. Charles Russell Lowell. But again, they don't get the books written about them like some of the other ones do. And admittedly, Dave Ireland 137 is important.
Yeah.
But even he doesn't hold that flank if the 6th Wisconsin and the 14th Brooklyn don't come bail him out too. So it isn't just him, but he's a huge part of the story.
Yeah.
Just like Chamberlain is. But again, people don't like Chamberlain because, and I don't mean people like today's people, like Gelzo, for example, not a Chamberlain guy, but his contemporaries in real time weren't huge fans of his.
Well, I think it was the way he talked about war. He glorified it, and I know in Howard's memoirs he kind of takes subtle shots at Chamberlain with talking about the glory of war. That it's not. And Howard's writing his memoirs at a time when I think like the Boer War was happening. Howard lost a son. His oldest was killed in a war, and his grandkids obviously fought in World War I. But Howard, has this chapter written, wrote it after Gettysburg, and he talks about we have to be really careful how we talk about war, because it's not glory. You don't hear about the blood-soaked hay in the hospitals, and I think he's referencing specifically the 11th Corps Hospital here at Gettysburg. But Chamberlain writing about how glorious it was, I think, did bother some of the
Well,
veterans.
he wasn't the only one. God
No, he
knows
wasn't. No,
Dan
no,
Sickles loved him some glory,
yeah.
right? I mean, think about there's a story about Dan Sickles that's not true. That says when he was wounded, he was firing away in his cigar as he was being taken. And it's urban myth.
Yeah.
But that's a story that's presented because his men wanted to present the tale that he was showing his men he was alive and he was a baller. I mean, it's a cool as hell story. I mean, if it were true, I mean, awesome. But it's not. He was basically white as a sheet, blood coming out of his leg, and basically in and out of consciousness. He would. I mean, I don't know where he's going to find time to fire a cigar up. It's a great story.
Let me just file the stogie here.
But I mean, okay, sorry, again.
No, go ahead. What were you going
to
say?
I was just going to say, but so a lot of these guys embellish, really push forward the glory of their commander, right? Yeah. And I would have liked to have, and this is one of those what if things. George Lamb Willard, okay, he gets killed here at Gettysburg on the 2nd. He gets his back of his head blown off by a shell and doesn't make it. I'm gonna spoil the ending there. He doesn't make it. Eliakim Sherrill takes over, and he gets killed the next day at Pickett's Charge. But he was really into kind of restoring the image of what was called the Harper's Ferry Cowards, right? Yeah. The 125th, 126th New York, 111th New York, and eventually the 39th New York, the Garibaldi Guards. But he gets killed the next day. He would have been somebody who probably would have gone really out of his way to promote the bravery of Willard at Gettysburg, because it was a baller what he did, but he gets killed the next day. You see a lot of people really promoting guys like Charles Dane and John Rawlins, those guys with Grant, right?
Yeah. James just mentioned John Rawlins.
But who's the one who comes out to say how great Chamberlain was? Nobody, right? No. They don't. He does it himself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to sit there. If you do yourself a good job and your subordinates say, something, Mary, you did a great job. You're fantastic. But you don't sit there and say, I did a great job. I'm the best.
Yeah.
And that's what got him into a lot of trouble. That's why when you read some of these stories about these commanders and their subordinates really putting them on a pedestal, that it says a lot more than doing it yourself, obviously. But that's the Chamberlain thing,
Yeah. Hooker had guys that did that. They were the ones that there was a couple different times that the press went after Howard for Chancellorsville, right after Chancellorsville, and then again after Hooker left the Western Theater, because he writes his wife and says, like, you're going to be reading about me in the papers and it's not going to be good because Hooker's upset and he's going to send his men after the press again. And, I think Elizabeth must have said something to Howard after Chancellorsville and said, like, you can't get upset about this. You just have to move on from it, because that's basically what he said. He's like, don't worry, I'm not going to get upset about it this time. Like, there's bigger things I need to be worrying about.
Right.
But just that Hooker is still going after him for Chancellorsville. He's obviously the punching bag. And yes, Howard does not have a good day at Chancellorsville, partly his fault, but also partly things not in his control. Mainly Stonewall Jackson, not knowing where he is and what's happening.
Well, no, I mean, Hooker being wounded was a big part of that. But he had his game plan was good at Chancellorsville. It really, really was. Mm-hmm. Coming off of Fredericksburg and after the Mud March and all that crap they did, they were in the right position, right time. Mm-hmm. But again, kind of like McClellan and Antietam, he had the opportunity to push forward and end it, and he chose not to.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a difference, though. I mean, Hooker admittedly, he writes, he lost confidence in himself.
Yeah,
I think the phrase was
Joe Hooker.
Joe Hooker lost confidence in Joe Hooker. That was a quote he said. I think he ballsed out. McClellan, I don't think ballsed out. I think he felt that he didn't want to be unnecessarily risky because of how important that battle was going to be politically in Washington.
Yeah.
He says, let's win this, but we can't screw this whole thing up. I think there's a difference. So when they talk about timidity, Hooker doesn't get enough of the blame pie as they're slicing that up.
Yeah.
versus some of the other ones do.
Yeah.
I mean, people rip on Meade for not chasing Lee after Gettysburg, the biggest victory the North probably had at that point.
Yeah.
But again, you talk about politics in Washington and the northern papers, and just like today, they never enough. Enough is never enough.
Yeah. Jim Miller mentions Sickles going after Meade for the Pipe Creek Circular, and that's why we still talk about the Pipe Creek Circular today. And AQ's jumping off here, but she said yesterday was the anniversary of Barlow's death. Barlow is like another like guy that I like Barlow, and it's because AQ.
The thing about
like
well,
you know,
the thing
I
about
like
Barlow, the thing about Barlow is he was at almost every big battle. He really was. I mean, he was just that guy. He was there. He's the guy in the movie who no one knows who he is, but he's in every movie. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, that guy was in Perfect Storm.
Right. That guy. You know that guy. Everyone knows who we're talking about. That guy. That's Barlow. But I think the problem with Barlow is because the way he looks like this sweet little innocent guy, no beard, looks like a 12. He had the reputation of being one of the hardest fighters. Mm-hmm. I would just invite anybody to read about Barlow at Spotsylvania, right? Yep. About how he pushed his men and how that whole thing went. Hard dude. Men didn't like him because they fought hard, but they did like him because they appreciated the fact that they were prepared.
The stragglers, he would go behind where the stragglers were and he would whack the back of their legs with his sword. Like, not a fan of the Germans, but he's still this like, and I do love his monument at Gettysburg.
He was not, I mean, Barlow was not a big self-promoter like a lot of these guys were.
No.
And so he did his job. He did his job, and that was the end of it. That was good about him. But yeah, so anyway, so AQ, it's nice to have her come on.
I do wonder if, and AQ and I have talked about this before, if Barlow had not been wounded, he might have ended up in the Western Theater with Howard.
Probably would have. Very good chance he would have,
Which means he would have been on like the march and all that. That would have been that's an interesting.
Well, I mean, if he didn't get wounded, he would obviously stay with the 11th Corps. There was no real changes. Yeah, he absolutely would have gone. He absolutely would have been, because you think about it, he was Schimmelfennig, Schurz. I mean, they all moved along the 11th and the 12th Corps. There's no reason in the world why Barlow wouldn't have been, because Howard liked Barlow.
Oh yeah, he did. They got along very well.
He was okay with von Gilsa, right?
Von Gilsa did not like him.
He did not trust any of the Germans. I know you keep saying he liked the Germans, but he didn't really like the Germans. He didn't trust them.
Not at first.
No, he felt that they were allowed to get him because they were, right, after the Franz Siegel thing. But he would have been out there and see how that would have gone.
Yeah, I think it would have been interesting.
Because the 11th Corps was gone by Bristow Station. They were gone. The 11th and the 12th had already been sent west, as did Longstreet got sent west.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the fact that post-retreat, when Meade did chase Lee, right? Yeah. Down to that Culpeper V area of Virginia, before they started moving back up again, heading towards Harper's Ferry. Yeah, they were all gone by that point. So he would have been gone.
That would have been really, really interesting to see how Barlow would have been in the West. I think he would have been. I mean, he's a great commander all the way through. Jim just says he loves The Perfect Storm, the book. It's one of my favorite movies. I need to read the book.
I know. And he's buried.
And Bill mentions, we've been to Barlow's grave. And AQ has been there many times.
Sure he has. No, he's buried a stone's throw from where I went to college, Mary. So we went one of the harder cemeteries to park at, by the way, in Brookline. If you go there, you're probably more likely to end up in the cemetery than not, depending where you park in that neighborhood, because it's basically on the side of a highway. But no, there's a lot of that. But no, everything did change after Gettysburg as far as personnel goes. Yep. Howard certainly got better, and he went out there more of a reclamation project in his own mind.
Yep. That's why Sherman wrote him that letter saying, like, look, I know what's happened to you. I know your reputation. Just let me tell you, I trust you.
And someone asked before about Slocum before. And this is where you read between the lines, where you get in trouble on the serious Facebook site pages, Mary. Maybe there was some shit going on between Slocum and Meade, which is maybe why Slocum went west. You never know.
Maybe there was,
but you never know. because certainly Longstreet needed a timeout,
Oh yeah.
and he went out there and
Oh, he went out west thinking I'm gonna take
well,
command.
why? Honestly, he probably should have though.
I
He
know.
went out there thinking he was, but then he gets, he has that really unfortunate battle against Burnside at Knoxville where he gets pantsed pretty good, and then he takes his ball and goes home to winter quarters. Doesn't want to go hang with Bragg anymore until he finally comes back. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the as you sit there and study these people, they didn't say anything publicly, but it does seem kind of strange. You're going to send probably your most experienced and senior corps commander out west, unless he had no choice in it. They may have just told him. But again, you have to read. I have to read more into the details of why the 11th and the 12th went west
Yeah.
after
Well, it's
Gettysburg.
because the 11th was one of the smaller corps. Howard explains it to his wife in a letter about what was going on. And that was the letter that I found where one day he was like, okay, it's rumored I might be put in charge of the Second Corps.
Yeah.
And then, and 4 days later, he's like, nope, I'm going out west now. So it changed like so quickly. But I do want to look into more why it was, Slocum who was sent. And maybe because the 12th Corps was smaller and they just,
Oh, who knows? I mean, this is a method of the madness. There always is. But like any of these things, a lot of these decisions are made from people in higher pay grades in a lot of cases.
yeah. Yeah. But it's still like the whole Barlow not getting wounded at Gettysburg and going out west is really interesting. But I know AQ and I have discussed it at one, like, and we discussed it briefly one time. But it's great that she's like kind of the voice for Barlow too. I think that's awesome.
Well, he's someone who is a B-level type person. No insult to Barlow, but he's not someone who's studied about in social studies in high school. But he's someone she obviously resonates to and has an appreciation for. And she studied, and we have a lot of people like that who studied random people.
Well, now I'm getting into the one regiment I like to study in the Eastern Theater is the 73rd PA. Because they have like a monument on East Cemetery Hill and they have a monument in Missionary Ridge, but do not get out of your car to look at it because it is in a bad neighborhood.
Yeah, not these.
Bad. Jim Miller knows what I'm talking about. It's not a good
I was there.
I know you were there too. I was gonna say you Jim, no.
I mean, it's not the worst,
No, but you don't want to go out of your car.
It's not the most worst. I've been in worse places than that.
Oh yeah, but I want to study them more. But I didn't really have like a Confederate regiment. But I've yesterday, as I was saying at the beginning of this, discovered the 7th Texas because I potentially have an ancestor who was with them. These are this Granbury's guys and Greg. I think his name was Joseph Gregg. Greg ends up going east and commanding Hood's Texans and gets killed. And that's when Granbury, when he leaves, Granbury takes over. But it was just like interesting. I just gravitated to it. And now I want to even if I can't find any more about this guy that could be my ancestor, I still want to study them because I find it, they are like 7 Texas, 1861, and they're right there at the surrender in Bentonville. And there's less than 100 of them at the surrender in Bentonville because they're just absolutely they're decimated. Morning goes to Sickles Leg. Jim says, yeah, there are places on Missionary Ridge that are a little sketchy.
Yeah. I mean, for me, if I had to pick a Confederate, I don't really have any favorites or anything, but I think if you had to pick a favorite for me, it would probably be 1st Texas. I probably stayed in Texas too. 1st Texas was despite with our friends in the 1st Minnesota St. Mary, 1st Texas had the highest casualties of any regiment in any battle. And that was at Antietam. Here at Gettysburg, Jerome Robertson was their commander. They fought, the great story of William J. Barbie, right? Firing at the Orange Blossom guys, Van Ellis's guys, the top of the Devil's Den. No, but again, everyone has their own favorite things, but it's fascinating to get into a little bit.
Well, I like 7th Texas because Hiram Granbury really, I found out about him obviously through Claiborne, and he's just such a, I don't know, Granbury. I love doing the episode about him because he's got such a fascinating story. It's a sad story because of his wife Fanny. She dies from ovarian cancer, and you found the stuff out about that picture, but that he had taken for her. But just that he's like, what was he, 6'4" or something?
It's big, yeah.
A tall guy, had a really deep voice, so he was able to he could shout and everybody could hear him, kind of thing. he's only, I think he was 33 years old when he was killed
Mhm.
at Franklin. And he's like, and that's the thing I find fascinating about Claiborne and his subordinates is they were all friends. They all got along. And I think that really helped with just how good they were as well. Because you have some issue, some instances, Stonewall Jackson did not get along with AP Hill. That probably had some effect on what was happening. And then again, Stonewall Jackson didn't get along with any of his subordinates. Miranda mentioned she likes to study the 33rd Virginia and 59th Virginia.
Yeah, I mean they're all you study them all. It's just interesting to see how some of these guys get really pounded hard. In the North, I mean, it's tough to say. Second Mass is pretty cool. 137 New York is pretty cool, but yeah. But again, it just be able to try to understand which which ones you resonate predictably to which ones you can associate to a little bit, right? And that's always been the thing.
Yeah, like Frank mentions 3rd Arkansas, 26th Alabama, 2nd South Carolina, 65th Illinois, and 59th New York are some of his favorites to study. Richard said maybe the 3rd in the top 3 Hirams of the Civil War. Yeah, because you have Grant, right? Hiram, Ulysses Grant, and then and Hiram Granbury. Who's the other Hiram? There's got to be another one.
There's a whole Hiram was very popular in the 19th century.
Yeah,
it's a very Masonic name, by the way.
It's one of my favorite names, actually.
Hiram.
Yep, I love the name Hiram.
Okay, no, it's definitely a cool name. No, but it's fascinating because you have Hiram Granbury's you have the Texas Brigade, right?
Yeah.
Hood's Texas Brigade, and then you have Jerome Robertson's Texas Brigade here in the Army of the Potomac, the 1st, 4th, and the 5th. Philip A. Work and those guys. Texans were Texans. Like I said, they don't have a lot of regiments, but they fought
never lag in a fight.
Never lag in a fight. Like I said before, they definitely paid their price at a lot of these battles. I mean, and they just got ripped to shreds.
Yeah. Richard says it's Hiram Berdan.
Oh, that's right. Sharpshooters, Berdan.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking here. So it's no, but it's cool though. It's fun to be able to study these people.
Well, especially if you had ancestors, because I know Miranda has ancestors that were with the Stonewall Brigade, and that's why she gravitates towards Stonewall. And that's so interesting. And for me, the 7th Texas was not just because the potential ancestor, but because it's
but that's therein lies the trap, though. When you start to study, your ancestors, you tend to admonish everything they've ever done because they were a relative, and
I'm not going to be admonishing
I'm just saying that's where you got to be able to separate one versus the other and sit there and say, okay, somebody could have been Nathan Bedford Forrest relative, and I know a lot of them and I know a lot of the relatives have come back to he was a relative. I don't agree with none of this that he did.
Stonewall's relatives did.
There was something I read about one of the relatives of Ulrich Dahlgren, right, who was interviewed, and he basically said, he was my relative, but I don't really appreciate anything he did because he hanged a slave. He did, so I don't, and so, but just some people, they're a relative, they could do no wrong. That's where you gotta be objective.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, when I found out, I'm like, okay, this is the one I kind of want to study and learn about this regiment. But then I've got the ones on the Union side as well. It's kind of like lost my train of thought, shockingly. Ghost of Sickles Lake. Hiram Granbury sounds like a thing of no. What if you find out your relatives are from Massachusetts?
Well, then you have smart relatives,
Yep. Hiram Granbury sounds like the name for an owner of a cola company.
He does. He sounds like somebody who should be in a comic book,
like a superhero,
a superhero comic book. But
he's in a graphic novel about Claiborne.
I know, but I mean, like one of those deals, like what I mean. No, it's good. It's very popular. You don't see too many Hirams as much anymore. But yeah, Hiram Berdan certainly. Grant, Granbury.
Berdan.
No, but Dan, when we did the reenactment here, not the reenactment, the the parade for
Yeah.
Remembrance Day weekend.
For Dan's sharpshooters were there.
We saw some Berdan sharpshooter reenactors. They're quite the presentation. You see them in full uniform. The green, they look pretty cool. You don't see too many walking the streets, but yeah, the places like that is when you start to see them. We should ready to jump off pretty soon. We have to go to that lecture. So
yeah, but we don't have to leave here till 12:45.
I know, but
here at 12:15. That's no. Bill, I'm a proud masshole.
Yeah, well, Mass, it's a great place. Could be heading back there in a few weeks too. So we got good to get back again. Every month or so, every couple months, I got to get back to the Holy Land and deal with all that stuff. So, but that should be a good lecture today. Wayne Motts, he's former guide, Gettysburg Foundation, former president of the museum, the National Civil War Museum, is doing a presentation on Ohio at Gettysburg. So we are going to go and we're going to watch Wayne.
Yeah.
And this will be our third lecture already. So what's great about here, and like a lot of these places, you get these free lectures and you get to hear a lot of cool stuff. And Wayne's a good dude. He's one of our buddies. So we're gonna go support him. So and if you are in the area, you can actually go on the website. They schedule these things every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, all the way through to like the end of the winter.
Yeah, it's like till end of February or beginning of March or something. And they are available on their YouTube channel too. So I think both lectures from last week are up. Highly recommend both. But I really enjoyed Dan Welch's talk about the cemetery. That was really fascinating.
Yeah, no, he does a good job. And so there's football today too, Mary. I guess we'll have to see what happens with that. I think it'd be so funny if the Bills lost today. I'm not going to lie. That would be so freaking funny if they lost today. Oh, God. I don't think they're going to. I think the Ravens will get them next week, but that would just laugh.
Yeah. Frank just said, thanks for these weekly discussions. So, yes, thank you for everybody for being part of it.
Yeah. And Frank, you be careful over there, man. You got to be careful out there in Los Angeles. That's a scary place right now. Got the video and those pictures of that. It looks like a movie. It's just unbelievable. I feel bad for those people, too. And, no question.
And Ghost of Sickles Legs said he's going to work the Red Wing versus Kraken game at 3.
Oh, cool. Yeah, unfortunately, my National Hockey League team stinks this year, so I'm just going to take this year off for worry about my college team. So
I am for the Super Bowl. I am throwing it all in with the Texans.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be anywhere near the Super Bowl, but it's okay. It doesn't matter. It's all fun. We had a good time last night. Ravens played the Steelers here last night. We'll jump off in a second, but it was pretty much a packed bar, almost 50-50 Steelers and Ravens fans, and it was fun being a neutral party, hoping both teams could lose, admittedly, but it was fun to sit back and watch them do it. So hopefully your team is still going. But I think it'd be cool if there was some new blood. We see the Lions get there. Maybe it'd be kind of cool. Maybe
that would be cool to see the Lions. Yeah.
Texans maybe. Anyway, all right. So what's coming up for us, Mary? What's happening?
So we have the episode which will be dropping on Friday with author Bennett Parton talking about his book Somewhere Towards
This is the
Freedom.
book right here. So it's Somewhere Towards Freedom: Sherman's March and the Story of America's Largest Emancipation. Very fascinating, interesting book. A different spin on the March to the Sea. It's an eye opener in a lot of different ways. If you like the personal stories, this book's up your alley. It doesn't just talk about left wing, right wing, all this other stuff. It talks about Ebenezer a little bit. Talks a lot about the post Savannah arrival, about how they dealt with all the refugees. There are thousands upon thousands of them. So, and it helps set up the Freedmen's Bureau, helps set up your boy Oliver Rose Howard in that position. So it's really good. It's kind of really leaning towards Reconstruction, and it does talk a lot about Andrew Johnson, how he kind of undid all of it afterwards, and how what he did to screw the whole thing up and stick it to any way chance he could. So we're definitely read the book, and then we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks the Battle of Roanoke Island, which is really cool. So we get to talk about Ambrose Burnside, Mary. Back to Rhode Island. Talk about Burnsy.
Yep.
And we'll talk about him. He has a good moment where he nicknames the Confederate Navy the Mosquitoes, the Mosquito Fleet, the hell he calls them. So it's a lot of fun. Definitely enjoy talking about that. So anyway, we'll do our thing. So hopefully it's warm where you are. Probably not because it's cold everywhere. And hopefully
freezing.
We can go from there. So as we jump off, Mary, any final words?
Thank you for everyone for joining us today for the great discussion. Hey Maria. Maria just came on.
Maria jumping on right as we're jumping off. What
Love
a surprise.
Maria.
Maria, she's probably in the store, probably filling up her purse right now. So who knows what she's doing? No, no,
She's awesome.
she is part of our BMI reenactment group along with Bill
Yep.
Edscorn, who was on here
Yep.
earlier too. So hopefully we'll be doing some shenanigans in Bentonville here pretty soon. All of us, though,
Yep.
be showing a lot of laughs, a lot of cigars, maybe some whiskey.
I gotta find myself some Brogans.
As long as Tony gets that fire going, we'll be happy.
Tony.
Right? That damn fire going. All right, so we are going to jump off. We are going to enjoy the rest of the day. Hopefully you do as well. So check out the episode, buy the book. I think you'll like it. And yeah, off we go.
Yep. Anyway, we'll see you guys hopefully next weekend. Not sure which day yet, but we will be back here with you.
Probably Saturday next weekend. Man.
Yeah, probably. I think so.
We got nothing going next weekend.
Nope.
Nothing going on here. It's wintertime in Gettysburg.
It's nice we don't have anything going on.
No, absolutely.
Yep.
All right, guys. So
everyone have a great day, and we will see y'all